when someone presents their projections with absolute conviction, something terrifying happens. Others feel psychological pressure to align with the projector's certainty, rather than trust their own contradictory observations. This is how families turn against scapegoated members, how workplaces mob innocent employees, how entire groups can abandon truth in favor of the shadow's illusion. Carl Jung studied this phenomenon closely, and what he found disturbed him. Among his patients, the ones who carried the most destructive potential were not those who doubted themselves, but those who projected with complete certainty. To stand before them was to feel reality bending. Your own perceptions grew shaky, while their convictions spread like contagion. It is not logic that persuades in these moments. It is psychic force. The unconscious pressing itself onto the collective, reshaping truth into delusion. Jung warned that this was the most dangerous sign of all, not madness in the obvious sense, but unconsciousness disguised as authority, the face of someone convinced they are right, while blind to the shadow moving through them. And this is why projection can turn lethal. A family convinced that one member is the problem will exile the scapegoat. A workplace convinced of an innocent employee's guilt will swarm like a mob. A culture convinced of its superiority will justify cruelty in the name of order. This is not theory. It is the archetypal pattern of the shadow. And once you see it, you realize how easily ordinary people can become instruments of destruction. So let me ask you, have you ever watched a group turn against one person without evidence? Have you ever felt the pressure to agree with a lie simply because the projector spoke with absolute certainty? If you have, then you have already encountered the most dangerous sign Jung ever described. In the next part, we will step deeper into Jung's discovery, why projection with conviction has such power over the human mind, and how it reshapes not only individuals, but entire communities. Why conviction in projection is so dangerous. Carl Jung understood projection as one of the most basic defense mechanisms of the psyche. When we cannot face our own shadow, our hidden envy, rage, weakness, or shame, we place it onto someone else. We say, "You are the liar. You are the selfish one. You are dangerous." And in doing so, we feel cleansed, as if the shadow is no longer ours. Most projections, Jung noted, are fragile. They crack under scrutiny. A child may accuse another of cheating, then quickly admit their own guilt. An adult may judge a neighbor, then realize the same flaw in themselves. But every so often, something different appears. A projection carried with absolute certainty. A claim repeated with unshakable conviction. And here, something changes, not only in the projector, but in everyone around them. Why is conviction so dangerous? Because human beings are wired to trust certainty. In the face of doubt, the most confident voice usually prevails. And so, when someone projects with absolute conviction, their shadow becomes contagious. The scapegoat begins to look guilty. The innocent employee begins to look suspicious. The targeted child begins to look like the problem. Others feel the pressure, psychological, invisible, undeniable, to align their perceptions with the projector's story rather than trust their own eyes. This is how reality bends. This is how entire families, workplaces, and communities betray their own truth. Jung saw this in his clinical practice. He wrote of patients who radiated an aura of authority, even when delusional. They could speak lies with such force that others began to question themselves. He called this participation mystique, a merging of psyches, where individual perception dissolves into the collective unconscious. And once this happens, the group no longer sees the world. They see only the projection. The scapegoat carries the shadow for all, and the mob feels righteous in their cruelty. Think of the witch trials. Ordinary villagers swept up in certainty convinced themselves that innocent women were agents of the devil. Think of workplaces where gossip becomes gospel, and one worker is destroyed by collective suspicion. Think of families where one child is labeled the problem, while the dysfunction of the whole is ignored. The pattern is always the same. One projector, absolute conviction, a group infected, an innocent condemned. This is why Jung called it dangerous, because it is not only destructive to the target, it is destructive to reality itself. Projection with conviction bends perception, warps truth, and reshapes entire communities into instruments of the shadow. So let me ask you, have you ever felt that pressure? The moment you doubted your own eyes because everyone else seemed convinced. The moment you stayed silent because the projector's certainty felt too heavy to resist. That silence is how the shadow wins. And that is why Jung warned us, to resist this pressure requires immense strength of soul. It requires the courage to trust your own perception, even when the crowd turns against you. In the next part, we will explore how this pressure spreads inside groups, why families, workplaces, even nations can turn against their own members in the name of a projected shadow. How groups become carriers of the shadow. Carl Jung warned us that the shadow is not only personal, it is also collective. Entire groups, families, workplaces, even nations can become hosts for the unconscious. And when a group takes on projection with conviction, the danger multiplies. It begins with one person, one projector speaking with certainty. Their words carry an invisible gravity, and slowly, others begin to orbit around it. At first, some may hesitate. They sense the contradiction, the gap between what they see and what they're told. But the projector's conviction weighs heavier, and soon the group begins to doubt their own eyes. This is how reality bends, not because the facts change, but because the collective perception shifts. Families know this pattern well. One child is labeled the troublemaker. Every misstep, every accident, every failure is magnified. While the real dysfunction, the cruelty of a parent, the silence of siblings, remains invisible. Now the family unites in their certainty, and the scapegoat becomes the carrier of everyone's shadow. The child grows up believing they are broken, when in truth, they were only holding what no one else dared to face. Workplaces show the same ritual. A rumor spreads, an employee is whispered about. Difficult, untrustworthy. The problem. Meetings become hostile. Colleagues withdraw. And soon, the entire organization acts as if the scapegoated one is guilty, without evidence, without question. The group is not defending truth. They are defending the projection that holds their collective shadow. History gives us the most chilling examples. Communities accusing outsiders of witchcraft. Nations uniting against a minority, convinced they are the source of all ills. The mob becomes righteous. Yet what they destroy is never the shadow in themselves, but the lives of the innocent. This is the archetype of the scapegoat, a figure who carries the unconscious sins of the many. It is a ritual as old as humanity, dressed now in modern clothes, but no less brutal. Why does this happen? Because the group, like the individual, fears its own shadow. It would rather exile one member than face its collective wounds. It would rather sacrifice truth than endure the discomfort of self-awareness. And when the group agrees to the lie, the scapegoat's suffering becomes the community's illusion of safety. But Jung warned, what is repressed will always return. The shadow denied by a group will one day rise in chaos, in violence, in collapse. Scapegoating delays the reckoning, but it does not erase it. So let me ask you, have you ever been in a group that turned against one person without cause? Did you feel the pressure to conform, to nod, to agree, even though something in you whispered, this isn't true? That whisper was yourself resisting the collective shadow, and to honor it is an act of immense courage. Mas, in the next part, we will explore why the scapegoat, though cursed, also carries a hidden gift, the chance to reveal the unconscious truth that the group is desperate to deny. The scapegoat as bearer of truth. Carl Jung observed a paradox. The scapegoat, though cursed by the group, also carries its unspoken truth. The very one who is exiled reveals what the collective is desperate to hide. In ancient rituals, the scapegoat bore the sins of the tribe and was driven into the wilderness. The people felt purified, cleansed, safe. But Jung would say, the shadow had not been destroyed, it had only been displaced. The goat carried not just sin, but revelation. And so it is in modern life. The child who is called the problem in the family is often the one who reacts honestly to dysfunction. The employee who becomes the target of whispers is often the one who speaks truth the group cannot bear to admit. The outsider accused of being dangerous is often the mirror reflecting the group's own violence. This is why the scapegoat archetype is both tragedy and gift. Tragedy, because they suffer the weight of projections that were never theirs. Gift, because they hold the key to the group's unconscious. They are the vessel of truth, hidden beneath layers of accusation. The scapegoat becomes what Jung might call a living symbol, a person carrying the rejected shadow of the many. Think of how this feels for the scapegoated empath. Every flaw is magnified, every gesture misread, every silence interpreted as guilt. The pressure is crushing, and yet within that pressure something alchemical occurs. The empath begins to see more clearly than the rest, for they alone hold the full weight of projection. They alone are forced to confront the group's denial. And in that confrontation, they sometimes awaken. They realize, this hatred is not mine, this guilt does not belong to me. I am carrying the shadow of others. Jung believed that to recognize projection is to begin the path of individuation. And for the scapegoat, this recognition can be transformative. The pain becomes initiation. The exile becomes doorway. Out the curse becomes clarity. The scapegoat, if they survive the fire, emerges with sight that others lack. They see the shadow not only in themselves, but in the collective. They understand the patterns that bind families, workplaces, even nations in unconscious repetition. And this makes them dangerous to the lie, because once they speak, they reveal what everyone else has been running from. This is why scapegoats are often silenced, shunned, erased. Not because they are weak, but because they threaten the fragile illusion of the group. Their very existence says, the shadow is here, and it cannot be denied. And so they are cast out. But in exile, they carry something precious. They carry truth. So let me ask you, have you ever been scapegoated? Felt the weight of blame that was never yours? If so, perhaps beneath the pain, there was also a strange clarity. The sense that you were seeing what others refused to see. That clarity is the hidden gift of the scapegoat. It does not erase the wound, but it transforms the wound into vision. In the next part, we will explore how to resist the collective shadow, how to stand firm when projections come with conviction, and how to trust your perception even when the group insists you are wrong. Resisting the collective shadow. To resist one person's projection is difficult. To resist the projection of an entire group can feel impossible, and yet Jung believed this act, though rare, is the mark of a truly individuated soul. Why is it so hard? Because human beings are tribal creatures. We long for belonging more than we long for truth. When the group unites in certainty, the pressure to conform is immense. It whispers, agree with us or be cast out. And to be cast out feels like death. So most surrender. They silence their doubts. They betray their own perception. They nod along with the lie, and the scapegoat suffers alone. But every so often, someone resists. They stand in the fire of the group's projection and refuse to bow. They say, no, I see differently. And in that moment, they embody what Jung called the self, the center of wholeness that cannot be swallowed by collective madness. How can you become such a person? Jung would say it begins with inner work, shadow work. The more you face your own darkness, the less power other people's projections have over you. When you know your own envy, anger, fear, you cannot be so easily manipulated by someone accusing you of those very things. Their conviction no longer hypnotizes you, because you already own what is yours. Second, you must trust your perception. When the crowd insists you are wrong, pause, breathe, and ask, what do I actually see? What do I actually feel? Hold to that like a lifeline. Even if your voice trembles, even if you stand alone, your perception is sacred. To betray it is to betray your soul. Third, you must find allies. Resistance is easier when even one other person dares to stand with you. History shows that mobs can be dissolved by a few courageous voices who refuse the illusion. Seek those who value truth over belonging and stand together. And finally, you must be willing to pay the price. To resist the collective shadow may cost you relationships, jobs, even communities, but Jung would remind you, what you lose in false belonging, you gain in authenticity. What you lose in approval, you gain in soul. Think of it this way. Every great spiritual teacher, every reformer, every prophet, at some point stood against the collective shadow. They were called mad, dangerous, heretical, but their refusal to betray their own perception became the seed of transformation for many. And so it is with you. To resist projection is not only self-preservation, it is service. For when you refuse the lie, you keep a space open for truth to return. So let me ask you, have you ever resisted the group's certainty, even at a cost? Have you ever said, no, this is not what I see, while others glared in disbelief? If so, you have already tasted what it means to stand in the self. And if not yet, ask yourself, when the next projection comes, will you align with the crowd or with your soul? In the next and final part, we will bring this journey to its conclusion, seeing how Jung's warning about the most dangerous sign is not only about others, but about us, and how facing our own shadow is the only way to ensure we do not become the projector ourselves. And so we arrive at the end. The most dangerous sign Jung ever described is not violence on the surface, not madness in its obvious forms. It is projection delivered with absolute conviction. When someone believes their projection fully, they no longer see you as you are. They see only their shadow. And worse, their certainty pressures others to agree. Families turn against scapegoated members. Workplaces mob innocent employees. Entire cultures unite against those who carry the shadow for the many. Jung found this so disturbing because it revealed how fragile reality is. Truth can bend under the weight of conviction. A lie, repeated with certainty, can feel more real than our own eyes. And yet, Jung also offered hope. For the one who has faced their own shadow cannot be captured by another's projection. The person who integrates their darkness is no longer hypnotized by the certainty of others. They stand firm, rooted in the self, even when the crowd turns away. And this is why shadow work is not optional. It is essential. Without it, we risk becoming projectors ourselves, convinced that our anger, our envy, our fear belongs to someone else. With it, we begin to see clearly, to carry our own darkness so we do not force others to carry it for us. The danger Jung described is not only out there, it is in us. The line between projector and scapegoat runs through every human heart. So the question becomes, will you face your shadow, or will you project it? Will you trust your perception, or surrender it to the crowd? Will you live as an instrument of illusion, or as a vessel of truth? Pause now, breathe, and write in the comments this sentence: I resist projection by... Finish it with your truth. It may be as simple as, I resist projection by listening to my own heart, or as powerful as, I resist projection by naming what I see even if I stand alone. Your words may become the mirror someone else needs tonight. And if this journey has spoken to you, I invite you to walk further. Subscribe to Inner Balance Psychology. Here we explore Carl Jung's wisdom, shadow work, individuation, archetypes, the Red Book, not as theory, but as a living path, a way to survive the projections of others and to guard against the danger within ourselves. Because this is not just Jung's warning, it is not just my story, it is your story. The most dangerous sign is projection with conviction, but the most powerful act is integration with honesty. The projector bends reality, but the individuated soul stands steady, unshaken, rooted in the self. And once you have faced your own shadow, no one's conviction can steal your truth again. The shadow is waiting, the light is waiting, and you are waiting. Step in, breathe, and begin.